Hi there, I'm Ben and welcome to my Chasing the Platinum video for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. First off, I'd like to apologise in advance if I pronounce any names or Japanese words wrong. It's going to happen. This video is going to be my experience of going from no trophies to the Platinum in Sekiro. I'll also tell you my thoughts on the game as we go, so it's kind of like a light review as well. At the end, I'll give two scores, one for the Platinum difficulty and one that rates the game as a whole. There's a lot to get through with this game, so let's get started. First off, I'll give you a bit of background. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is from highly regarded studio From Software. You may have heard of their previous projects, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. They're kind of infamous. For those that don't know, they're actually a Japanese developer. You wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that by looking at their back catalogue though. All of the previous games I just mentioned have Western settings. Sekiro, however, changes all of that. It's set during the Sengoku period of Japan's history. You play as a lone wolf type character called, well, Wolf. He's a shinobi that's been tasked by his adopted father to protect a young lord who is from a very special bloodline. Now, I don't want to get into the story too much as I don't want to spoil anything. Obviously, people do compare this game to Dark Souls and Bloodborne, it's just the natural thing to do. On the surface of it, they're very similar. Metroidvania style layout, many boss fights and a crushing difficulty that punishes you each time you die. When you actually sit down and play Sekiro, it couldn't feel more different. Now, I have only played Bloodborne personally, so I can only compare it to that. I won't get into the gameplay mechanics just yet though, I'll do that shortly. What we're going to do now is prepare for my journey through the game to obtain the Platinum Trophy. Before I even play any game, I always research the trophies to see if I need to pay attention to anything or if I can just freely play through the game and get the trophies later. Unfortunately, with Sekiro, the former is true. There are a lot of trophies you need to be aware of while playing the game. Most importantly is the fact that there are 4 endings. After seeing this, I did some extensive research and formulated my plan of attack. What I came up with was a 2.5 playthrough plan. What I would do was play through the game while collecting all of the prosthetic tools, prayer beads and gourd seeds. Also, while doing this, I'd take on all of the optional bosses and mini bosses that I came across. Most of the prayer beads are actually dropped by mini bosses anyway. On top of all that, I'll be setting up 3 of the 4 endings by collecting certain items during my first playthrough. There is a point in the game where the story branches and you can either get the bad ending or one of the 3 good endings, depending on which item you hand over at the end of the game. For the first playthrough, I was going to be choosing the good endings and making a backup save just before the final choice of the game. I'd use one item, get one ending, reload, use a different item, get the second ending, reload once more, use the final item and get the ultimate good ending. Now, some of you may think this is cheating or cheap and I'm tricking the game, and that's fine. But I've always done this if a game's ending hinges on one final choice. If the choice is a lot earlier on, that's fine, I'll replay the game, but it's literally the last thing you do. No matter how good a game is, I'm never a fan of having to play it more than twice. Speaking of replaying the game, that's what I'll be doing after getting the 3 good endings. I'll start New Game Plus and get the bad ending. Now, the reason that I need to do another half playthrough after that, well, it's not even another half playthrough really, is because you need a certain rare crafting item called lapis lazuli. I have no idea if that was even close. You can only get these during a good playthrough and you only can get 6 of these per run, and you need 10 to fully upgrade all the prosthetic tools. So what I'll do is get to the major decision that determines the end path, make yet another backup save, then continue on finishing the bad ending. After that, reload for one final time and choose the good ending path so that I can collect the remaining lapis lazuli. I need to fully upgrade all the prosthetic tools. That is a lot to get through, you can see why all the preparation was needed. Right, with all that being said, I think it's time to actually start the game. I'll just mention a detail that is really small but is something I greatly appreciated. As you start the game for the first time, a couple of menus pop up with all the important options that people like to change. Invert y-axis, subtitles, speaking language, things like that. I always forget to change these when I start a game and it's just a nice touch to have them up front. By the way, the option to have the voice acting in Japanese with English subtitles is definitely the way to go. Personally, I love to listen to the Japanese language. I have no idea what they're saying, it just sounds great. For all I know, the Japanese voice talent could be phoning it in and giving a poor performance. Still sounds good to me though.
主従の約定に従い、命を落とし、我に仕えよ。
So first off, there is no character customization in Sekiro. You play as Wolf. He wears the same clothes and uses the same sword throughout the whole game. I think this has to do a lot with the game's presentation. There is a proper story to Sekiro, so having a central, named protagonist makes sense. There is still a lot of the environmental storytelling that FromSoft are famous for, so anyone that likes diving into the rich lore that they create for their games can still do that. Gameplay wise, the biggest difference between Sekiro and its predecessors is the lack of a stamina bar. I have to tell you, this is so liberating. In Bloodborne, you constantly have to monitor your stamina and make sure it doesn't run out at the wrong moment, as it can be fatal. In Sekiro, you're free to run around and swing your sword as much as you like. But ironically, you won't be doing this, the sword swinging at least. Most fights can be won without a single attack on your part. This is because of a new mechanic called the posture bar. To emphasise how important posture is in this game, the bars are given top billing. They're in the centre of the screen, your enemies is at the top and yours is at the bottom. The health bars are tucked away in the left hand corners. Regular enemies will have their bars above their heads. Posture is in a vibrant orange and health in a dull red. There are very few times I actually kept an eye on an enemy's health over their posture. Even in the first area of the game, you're mainly taught how to break posture. Speaking of the first area, I thought I was going to cruise through this game after killing the first few guys. I was just cutting through them. Until the first mini-boss, that is. Oh well, that was definitely further than I was expecting to get before my first death. This first mini-boss is meant to teach you all about breaking posture and death blows. A death blow can be performed once an enemy's posture bar is full. They are fantastically violent finishing moves that are super satisfying to pull off. Bosses will take usually 2, sometimes 3 death blows to take down, however, so you will have to fill their bar more than once. After taking down this mini-boss, it's time for the first real boss of the game, sort of, Genichiro Ashina. This guy introduces you to perilous attacks. You can see a perilous attack coming as a red kanji, I believe they're called, will appear on the screen. They come in 3 forms, a sweep, which can be just jumped over, a grab, which can be sidestepped, or a thrust, which requires a special move called the Makiri counter to, well, counter. You don't learn this until later in the game, however. I didn't know how to react to any of these moves and got annihilated within 30 seconds. That's okay though, because you can't win this fight. It always ends in Wolf losing an arm. This whole section of the game is actually a tutorial on how you're going to get your ass kicked for the next 50 plus hours. After waking up from the involuntary arm amputation, I find that I have a new arm, a prosthetic one. This arm adds yet another layer to the combat in the game. From now on, as I explore, I'll also have to keep a lookout for new prosthetic tools. These are basically attachments for the arm, essentially turning it into a Swiss army knife. Anyone? No? Okay. I'm not going to lie, but most of the tools are pretty useless. Sure, they have some niche uses, but I only found one of them to be truly useful at all times, the Shinobi firecrackers. They are perfect for disrupting enemy attacks and allowing you to get a few hits in. I left the safety of the dilapidated temple and began to start exploring the world. This is when I began to realise how beautiful looking Sekiro really is. Sure, there are games that look better from a technical standpoint in the sense that the textures look better and they have better character models, things like that. But as the saying goes, just because you have a better camera doesn't mean you can take better pictures. Sekiro's environments are a work of art, like old Japanese paintings. They're a bit rough around the edges, but if you're concentrating on the small details, you're missing the bigger picture. When I played Bloodborne, sorry to go back to that game again, but it's the only other From Software game I've played, there always felt like there was an impending doom just around the corner. In Sekiro, you don't get that. It's so peaceful on top of the mountains. It's silent for most of the time, save for a gentle score that makes you feel even more relaxed. The snow is gently falling to the ground without a sound, and you completely forget you're playing one of the hardest games in recent memory. This all came crashing down, however, when I got to the next mini-boss. Yep, we're going to go for it. General Namernovakamara. Nailed it. Of course, he killed me. It was okay though, I got a trophy for resurrecting for the first time. If you told me that you missed this trophy on your first playthrough, I would call you a liar. Dying is just part of Sekiro, hence the reason for a resurrection mechanic. You basically get 2 goes at every fight before dying for good. When you do die, you're transported to the last idol that you interacted with before the death. You lose half of your money, known as Sen, and half of the XP you have gained towards your next level. Once you fill the XP bar up and gain a level, that's banked. You won't lose that when you die. Sometimes when you do die, a divine intervention known as unseen aid might happen and you won't lose any Sen or XP. Keep dying though and this percentage will go down because you spread a disease known as dragon rot. It turns out when you resurrect, you're basically sucking the life out of any friendly NPCs that you have met. Do this too much and they'll get sick. I knew this mechanic existed before starting the game and I was worried that it might be more of a problem than it actually is, resulting in NPC deaths etc. It's actually nothing to worry about. If an NPC catches dragon rot, you just can't continue any side quests for them, none of which are needed for the platinum anyway. They never actually die either, they just whinge constantly that they've got a cough. Most importantly, you can still trade with vendors when they have dragon rot, so that's all that matters really. You can eventually cure dragon rot, but the resources that are needed to do so are very rare. I found myself in one of those funny situations where the items are so rare that I didn't want to use them, so I never did, and it didn't really matter. I'm going to fast forward a bit now. I did beat the mini boss pretty easily after I realised you can just sneak up on him and remove one of his health bars before starting the fight. This is actually a tactic I used often. The first major boss that I came to was Lady Butterfly. For an inexperienced Sekiro player, Lady Butterfly is brutally difficult. Her difficulty and fighting style is basically the game's way of asking, have you been paying attention to what we've been teaching you? To make things even worse, I have since found out that Lady Butterfly isn't the first boss most people fight. In fact, she's completely optional as she's in a side area that can be easily missed. So I was at base level Wolf when I took her on. Basic health, basic attack power and just 1 extra healing gourd that I got from the previous mini boss I just mentioned. I'm not ashamed to say that Lady Butterfly kicked my arse non-stop for about an hour. I just could not figure out how to beat her. I thought this was going to be the end before I'd even started. I almost felt like giving up. The main thing that kept me going actually was the thought of having to admit to my subscribers that there wasn't going to be a Sekiro video because I couldn't even beat the first boss. It felt like she was so fast, agile and unpredictable. She would jump up onto invisible wires and come crashing down with an unblockable attack. Eventually I realised that throwing a shuriken at her would stop her doing this attack, meaning I didn't really have to worry about that one anymore. Next were her sweep attacks. Again, they're unblockable, but I realised I could just jump and avoid them altogether. So that was those sorted. All that was left was her flurry of needle claw attacks. These are her normal attacks. These can be easily blocked, but what I wanted to do was deflect them for extra damage to her posture bar. I just never managed to get the timing down properly. What I realised about this was that you can just spam the block as she attacks and you will more often than not deflect her attacks. I didn't solely rely on this tactic, but it helped me learn her patterns a lot better. I've heard people say that Sekiro is like a rhythm game, and I thought that saying this was a bit weird actually. All games require certain button presses at certain points, but no, it really is. It's just a shame that I'm terrible at them. For games like Bloodborne, you need to read an incoming attack and dodge accordingly. For Sekiro, you need to read an incoming attack and react accordingly. Sometimes it may well be a dodge, but it could also be a jump, block, deflect, use of a prosthetic tool or even perform a Mikiri counter. It's very mentally demanding. Finally, after about 2.5 hours, yes it took me that long to get this fight down, I managed to beat her. To prove how far I'd actually come, I removed her first life bar without taking any damage. The same can't be said for her second bar though. In fact, at one point I break her posture and fail to perform the death blow in time and have to continue the fight. I got severely punished for this mistake. I was completely freaking out and was so annoyed that I missed it. Luckily I managed to keep my nerve and finally land the fatal blow. I've never felt relief like it, and I've beaten every boss in Bloodborne, even the DLC ones. After Lady Butterfly, very few bosses gave me any trouble for a while. As I cut through the mini bosses I got prayer beads. For every 4 of those I collected I was able to upgrade my health and posture bars. And for every main boss I beat I was able to upgrade my attack power. The most important upgrade though, as corny as it may sound, were my reflexes. I was really starting to enjoy Sekiro and I couldn't wait for the next challenge. With the combat system being so deep and fascinating to master, I even found myself killing every little enemy I came across. Even when I died, I wouldn't just run through areas to get back to the point where I was. I wanted to engage every enemy I met so I could just get better at the combat. I had a feeling I might need to. The difficulty had to spike again at some point. And that some point was the Guardian Ape. Now this guy is not necessarily difficult, he's just drastically different. Up until this point the game has been teaching me to deflect attacks and concentrate on breaking an enemy's posture bar. The Guardian Ape, however, throws all of that out of the window. Dodging, running away and keeping distance is key when fighting this guy. There are very few windows to attack as he likes to thrash around wildly. He also likes to throw his dookie at you. Yep, that's right, he literally craps in his hand and throws it at you. To add insult to injury, if it hits you, you take poison damage as well as normal damage. Another way that this fight differs is that you're far more likely to deplete his health bar before filling up his posture bar. Again, a massive departure from the rest of the enemies. This fight is actually one of my favourites in the game. Now I'm going to spoil a bit of a surprise when it comes to this fight, but it's also the reason why it's one of my favourites. So please go to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to know what it is. Okay, so now that they're gone, as you can see the Guardian Ape only has one red dot in the top left corner. This means it'll only take one death blow to kill him. But if you've played this game, you know what happens after you kill him. Yep, he comes back to life, picks up the sword that was jammed into his neck along with his head for some reason. We've all heard the phrase a game or a fight of two halves. Well, this truly is, and is the reason I like it so much. The first part you're fighting against a beast and you have to completely change the way you play the game. The second half, however, is back to business as usual. The Guardian Ape is not exactly proficient at using the sword, but deflecting attacks and breaking posture is back in and the best way to beat him. You still have to keep your distance at certain points as he has a scream attack that inflicts terror damage, which is probably the mechanic I dislike most in the game. Terror is inflicted by very few enemies, but it's so memorable because of how annoying it is. Basically, when your terror bar fills up, you're dead. Simple as. There are ways to block it and cure it later in the game, but even then the bar fills up so quickly it can still take you by surprise. Okay, so after a few attempts and learning the ape's very simple attack patterns, I was able to beat him fairly quickly. At this point now, when you defeat the Guardian Ape and Corrupted Monk, the game world changes, locking certain mini-bosses and areas off until your next playthrough. I took this opportunity to make sure I had all the prayer beads, prosthetic tools and gourd seeds available up until this point. Very shortly after this is when you have to make the important decision of whether you're going for the good or bad endings. Now I don't want to give anything away with regards to spoilers, and the rest of the bosses from here on out are spoilers in of themselves. Also, for the sake of keeping this video from going on too long, I'm going to summarise what I did next and just move straight to my verdicts. So yes, I chose the 3 good endings first and collected the items needed for each ending before defeating the final boss. Doing this would literally allow me to make a save after defeating the final boss, get one ending, reload, make the next choice, then reload and choose the final option. There really isn't much to it. I will just mention that the boss that's in the same area as Lady Butterfly during the good endings was the most difficult one in the game for me. If you've played the game, you know who that is. I bet it took me 5 or 6 hours to beat them. Now after getting the good ending, I had to start New Game Plus and go for the bad endings and collect the rest of the rare resources so that I could fully upgrade all the prosthetic tools. I thought that New Game Plus would be a piece of cake. Everything carries over, including health, posture and gourd upgrades. I can tell you it most certainly isn't easy though. Shiitake mushrooms does this game get harder on New Game Plus. The standard enemies aren't too bad, but the boss's life and posture bars just don't seem to go down, and their damage output seems to be severely increased. For this reason, I only fought who I needed to fight and essentially did a speedrun of the game. I was actually able to get through to the ending's decision again in about 3 or 4 hours. I made a save here as I was going to need to come back to it very shortly. Choosing the bad ending actually cuts out a lot of the game. You make the choice, fight 2 bosses, one after another I might add, and that's it, game over. You completely miss out a large section of the game. You know how I mentioned that the boss difficulty was increased on New Game Plus? Well, I don't think that's more evident than with the final 2 bosses of the bad ending. Obviously I hadn't fought these 2 before, but going off the increase in difficulty of the previous bosses, I think they would have been a lot easier the first time round. Again, I'm not going to tell you who they are because it is a story spoiler. After finally beating them and getting the bad ending, I had all of the ending trophies. I reloaded the game one final time, chose the path of the good endings again and carried on to find the final 4 lapis the blue crystals I needed to fully upgrade all the prosthetic tools. After that I'll be left with what I thought was a tiny bit of XP grinding to obtain all the skills in the skill tree. Now this is where the game fell apart for me. I will admit that yes, had I actually played the game 4 times and gotten all 4 endings individually, I wouldn't have had to do so much grinding. But I still reckon I would have had to have done at least half of it. I had to farm XP near the end of the game for about 5 or 6 hours, and this involved killing the same 5 enemies non-stop for the entire time. I actually found the area on my first playthrough. It's where the chained ogre is at the start of the game. I did it for a while, then I thought I have to check and see if anyone's found a better place. Turns out, nope, they all recommend this spot. If anything made me want to quit trying to get this platinum, this was it. I couldn't believe I had to farm so much. At the start the levels jump up quite quickly, but every level progressively takes more XP to gain. The final one took about 12 minutes alone. I really hate that this trophy is included. I don't understand the whole idea of giving us branching upgrade choices to make the character suit our playstyle, only to then make us have to unlock everything to truly complete the game. Even without farming and just replaying the game multiple times, it serves no purpose. I never really used any of the skills anyway, I only used the passive buffs and that was it. After 6 hours of constant farming while watching E3, I finally unlocked the final skill and got the platinum. It really is a shame that this is how my experience of the game ended. Pointless grinding is always remembered. For that reason, it's kind of ruined the experience getting the platinum for me. Bloodborne did it perfectly, everything just fell into place leading to a very enjoyable platinum. I didn't even mind doing the chalice dungeons. Having said all that, even with the god-awful grinding at the end, I cannot recommend Sekiro enough. For that reason, I'm going to award it a bronze buy it now rating. Trophy wise, this game is very difficult and the post-game XP grinding is very tedious. For that reason, I've awarded it a bronze trophy. A lot of people will either not be able to get the platinum because of the difficulty, or they'll give up along the way because of the multiple playthroughs or grinding. If trophies do not bother you and you just play through a game once or twice, I urge you to pick this game up. Yes, it is difficult, but most of the super hard bosses are optional anyway. Anyway, at this point I'm speaking to anyone who isn't a Soulsborne veteran, as the people who are will already own this game. Is this the most difficult game in the series? Well, yes and no. I would argue that it's probably easier than Bloodborne, but it's definitely harder to initially learn and most definitely to master. Now at first that might not make sense as it seems counterintuitive. How can something be harder to master yet be easy to complete? In Bloodborne you could just overlevel if you got stuck and this would make a boss easier. In Sekiro that's not an option, upgrades are tied directly to beating the bosses themselves. Therefore you genuinely need to get good at the game, and you will because you are forced to. There's no easy way out. If you look at the games on paper though, Sekiro has everything you need to make the game easier. You can block, jump and there's no stamina bar, the complete opposite of Bloodborne. Once you really start to play the game how the game wants you to play it rather than how you think it should be played, it becomes a lot easier. Well, not easier, the game is still hard as balls compared to most games, but you know what I mean. So yes, to summarise, everyone buy this game, but don't expect to earn the platinum without a lot of patience and dedication. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. I hope you like this style of video that I'm trying out. Please let me know what you thought in the comments below. Also, while you're down there, please subscribe if you aren't already, and maybe even drop a like and share if you want to help me out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.